Good afternoon and welcome to an Innovation Forum webinar about how to develop circular economy in business, sponsored by Accenture Strategy. I'm Ian Welsh, Editorial Director at Innovation Forum. This webinar is intended to provide an understanding of what the circular economy is, why businesses are looking at developing circular economy strategies, and then explore the benefits that the circular economy can bring to long-term business sustainability. For our panel this afternoon, we have Justin Keeble, Managing Director, Sustainability Services, Europe, Africa and Latin America with Accenture Strategy, Marcel Jacobs, Director, Supplier Sustainability in Philips, Forbes McDougall, Head of Circular Economy at Waste, Water and Energy Management Specialists, and Project Manager, Research, Development and Innovation at the leading chemicals and coatings company. Thank you very much for being with us. There are no slides, as this is not a presentation. It's a structured panel discussion throughout with a question and answer session towards the end. Audience members can get involved by posting questions via the webinar software that will come through to me and my colleagues, and which I will then put to our panel, principally in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the webinar. So, throughout the discussion, please do send us any comments or questions, and I will put them to the panel a little bit later on. You will also receive a recording of this webinar via email, which I urge you to share with any colleagues that may be interested. The webinar forms part of the build-up to the Circular Advantage Business Forum, a conference that Innovation Forum is hosting in London in a few weeks on June 8 and 9. The focus of this conference will be how different businesses can successfully commercialise circular business models to reduce risk and costs and to increase revenue and profit. Delegate passes are still available. For more information, visit the conference website. The details are on your screen right now. So, first things first, what are we talking about when we talk about the circular economy? What does the circular economy mean for business? And what are the basic differences between a linear and circular approach? Marcel Jacobs, I wonder if you could kick us off with your thoughts on that.
Hi, this is Marcel speaking. Let's say the whole circular economy thing is not a thing, and I think it's going, let's say, in a direction where people see it as an extension of, let's say, the normal way of doing business. For Philips, it's a challenge because of the diversity of our product portfolio and the fact that we always have been a manufacturer. It makes sense that we identify new areas where we can meet, let's say, the global trends. And let's say we face certain challenges, but also opportunities. So when we look at challenges that we directly face is dealing with resource availability and pricing. At the same time, the increase of the middle class consumers. So how do we deal with that? And they are very interconnected because of the availability of resources. How do you match that with that increase of the middle class? So how can we benefit without being impacted in a negative way as a company? On the other hand, there are also a lot of opportunities. Think about big data. So what can we do with our services or solutions that we provide in having access to big data to understand more how consumers behave and act? At the same time, how can we be a provider of big data, of patterns, let's say lighting in a building or lighting in an infrastructure environment? Another thing is changing of models of consumer consumption. So it's the shift from owning a product to access to a product. What does it mean for us as a company, and product development, product maintenance? And that the same counts for the moving from transaction to relationship. So for Philips, it's a challenge, and we test a lot. We haven't found the answer yet, and what we need to do is we need to collaborate. So think about design, think about collaboration. That's more or less as a starting point.
Great, thank you very much, Marcel. I wondered if perhaps our other speakers have some initial thoughts. Forbes, perhaps you could outline a little bit what the circular economy means for you, just in general.
Yes, hello Ian, thank you. I think for Veolia, we're definitely seeing, as Marcel said, that a lot of circular economy thinking is, to a certain degree, an extension of business as usual. for some of our customers. And it does require some new business models, as I think we're going to touch on later. But what we're really seeing is an interest in access to raw materials and maintaining access to raw materials in competitive markets, and also driving value for businesses. Because quite honestly, there are companies out there who are doing this now and are thinking circular. And if your business is not doing it, I think you're very quickly going to be at a disadvantage. And from a Veolia point of view, with us operating in waste, energy, and water, we believe that this is something that's going to help our business develop and is the path that we are going to have to follow for our business. Some of the synergies between the business units are useful, but circular business models really are what we are looking to the future to develop in partnership with our customers.
Great, thanks very much indeed. Martin, what about at AkzoNobel? What does the circular economy mean for you and your company?
Yes, so as Marcel mentioned, collaboration is a very important aspect of the circular economy. So you cannot do it on your own. And it also very much depends on the kind of industry that you are active in. So AkzoNobel is active in chemicals, paints, and coatings. So in paints, it's quite difficult to reclaim your product when it's being used. You don't want to scrap the paint off the wall and start using the material again. But in chemicals, it's much more common to have already kind of circular business model. For example, in some of the chemical clusters that we are active in, many of the companies are supplying the other companies next to them. And in some cases, we supply, for example, chlorine to a customer. We get back the hydrochloric acid, turn that back into chlorine. So some of those circular models are actually already in place in the chemical industry. But it really depends on the type of product, the sector, the kind of company, and to what extent that already happens.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to just move things on a little bit now and discuss the different types of circular business models that are developing. Now, this is an area where Accenture have done some extensive research, identifying some distinct categories of circular business models. Justin, I wonder, would you be able now to take us through some of your conclusions and outline the different circular business models that Accenture's research has identified?
Absolutely, Ian, and hello everyone, and thanks very much for inviting me to take part. So Accenture's recently published a report called The Circular Advantage, which hopefully many of your listeners will have seen, which involved us interviewing over 50 executives and reviewing over 150 case studies of the circular economy. And what was clear from that work was actually you can look at the circular economy in terms of 5 fairly distinct business models. And I'd like to just take you through those and perhaps give you a few examples, and then hopefully it will seed some discussion. So the first business model is about circular supplies. So this is companies who are recognizing that there's an opportunity now to provide fully renewable or recyclable or biodegradable inputs as substitutes for linear ones. So effectively finding new materials that can replace single life cycle inputs. And perhaps a great example I'm sure we'll hear more about from Martin is the work that AkzoNobel is doing in developing bio-based chemicals, for example, developing bio-based coatings for food packaging. The second is about resource recovery, and this isn't new. I mean, we've talked for decades about recycling, we've talked for a long time, and we've seen some great examples of industrial symbiosis. This is effectively where companies are recovering value from their waste outputs generated either in their own operations or in different parts of the value chain, and are then creating new sources of value for companies receiving those materials. So it's seeing waste as a resource, it's about returning byproducts from the manufacturing process, or it is about the classic recycling or upcycling of materials. And I think there's a great example of GM who now recycle 90% of their manufacturing waste and have been able to develop a landfill-free manufacturing process, which is generating upwards of $1 billion in annual revenues from the resale of byproducts through that manufacturing process. The third is about product life extension, and this is about extending the working life cycle of products and components through repairing, through upgrading, and through reselling products. It's about shifting the emphasis from volume sales to focusing on the performance and the durability of the product. And I think there's a great example of Project ARA that Google is leading, where they're looking to develop a modular phone that allows you to replace aspects of the mobile phone to extend its life and its durability. And the fourth is about sharing platforms, which I know many of you will have heard a lot about, and this is the idea of using particularly digital platforms for renting, for sharing, for swapping, for lending, for gifting and bartering products and services, effectively allowing you to increase the velocity and the utility of the asset. Today, most assets, as many of you will know, are really underutilized. I heard a fact a couple of days ago that 80% of things stored in a typical developed home are used less than once a month. And I'm sure many of you will know the stat that 97% of the time most of our cars sit parked and unused. So this is about how we get much more velocity and utility from resources, and in many cases are being enabled through digital. So if you look at the impact of Airbnb, for example, in increasing the utility of people's homes, or Audi Unite is a great example, which is being piloted in Stockholm, where they're offering a personalized micro-sharing platform which allows 4 friends to share a new Audi, and then it uses digital dashboards and a beacon to monitor usage. And then the final one is product as a service, which is where consumers can lease product or pay per use. And this is great for companies or individuals who want greater flexibility rather than actually owning the asset. And again, allows us to get much more utility from the resources employed. And I'm sure we'll hear from Marcel about Philips, where they're now offering lighting as a service. And there are many, many other examples. Michelin, for example, are now offering tires as a service, where they've developed a very innovative business model where you can pay per miles driven. So at a high level, and very happy to explore them further.
Thanks. I wonder if we could just turn to our other panelists and talk about models that Justin has identified, how they, if you give us a little bit of information about how AkzoNobel is creating a circular supply chain, the sort of products you're developing, and also maybe the challenges of collaboration with other parties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as AkzoNobel, we have set ourselves very ambitious sustainability targets, and we also measure our targets not just for our own operations, but we look at the full chain, so from oil and gas up to disposal of our product. And that means that we cannot only focus on our own operations, but we really need to involve our suppliers, our customers, and even their suppliers and customers. So what Justin was referring to, those models, one he was mentioning bio-based coatings for food packaging. So last year we introduced a new technology which allowed paper cups that you use for cold drinks to be fully recyclable. So that's one example where we are only supplying a small piece of this product, but that enables then the full recycling of this cup. Another project worth mentioning is that we are looking at waste as a resource. So there's a lot of waste which is currently being sent to the landfill or being incinerated, so basically being underutilized. And what we are looking into today is that we're looking into converting this waste into useful raw materials again. So we're looking at a new technology which would gasify the waste, and then that gas can be converted into base chemicals again, which can be the raw materials for both our chemicals and our coatings operations. And that requires then a lot of collaboration, because you need to work with someone who develops the technology, someone who can supply the waste and handle that, like a waste management company, a company that can produce the chemicals, can take offtake those. So it becomes quite a complex model, but that's really needed then in order to get such a new technology and a new business model flying.
Great, thank you. That's interesting. I mean, talking about waste as a resource, I wonder if I can bring in Forbes now. I mean, as Veolia, waste management's a big part of what you guys do. So, how have you, how might the circular economy transform the role of the waste industry, do you think? And I'm wondering, what will the industry look like long term? And will you have customers becoming suppliers, for example?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think basically the waste management industry see ourselves as really the foundation of a circular economy, because obviously we've been heavily involved in the resource reuse and recycling for a long time. And, as such, quite a lot of the low-hanging fruit, the conventional materials recycling, paper, plastic, metals, is fairly well established. I mean, obviously there's optimization to be done, and there's waste streams that still need to be accessed, better sorting technology, etc. But that's sort of developing at a fairly fast rate. But I think there are additional opportunities, and quite significant opportunities at that. And certainly we were looking at our portfolio of what we did as an organization in the context of the 5 business models that Justin has outlined. And we felt that we played in each of these areas, and some were much more significant than we first imagined. We've got quite a lot of, we have an industrial services business that does cleaning and maintenance, obviously, falling into that product life extension. And it's, not just for products, but it's actually for facilities, factories, etc. So we felt we played in there. Circular supply chains is an area that's of great interest to us. Many of our existing customers are interested in securing supplies of certain raw materials or recycled materials back into their business, and that does move us from more of a sort of take material and dispose of it, the sort of the bad old days of waste management, to a more of a long-term partner where we're very integrated with our customers to actually provide them with materials at a spec that they can use, rather than just bales of sort of dirty plastic bottles. And we're also involved in sort of toll recycling of solvents, for example. So we have customers that previously were just buying new solvents and paying to dispose of it once used, and now we have technology that allows us to buy these waste solvents from our customers, clean them up, and then resell them back to our customer at a discounted price. So I mean, they are winning already using a circular model compared to their competition that aren't using these sort of closed loop opportunities. I think final point, just long term, the waste management industry will evolve, and I think they'll deliver a lot more in the way of bespoke solutions to customers, because as I said, a lot of the low-hanging fruit is gone, or we know how to solve much of the conventional problems. We're now looking at much more challenging waste streams. That's going to require partnerships, because to get capital investment for challenging waste streams, we need to know that we're not going to be just replaced by another waste management company next month. We need to have time to invest in technology and innovation, so the partnership approach becomes much more important. And I think that's the way the industry is going to move forward, by moving up the supply chain and delivering better quality materials to partners as we develop our business.
Thanks, Forbes. Yes, it does seem and feel like this is all part of moving to longer-term relationships with partners, and just thinking in terms of a longer-term approach to business, which is all part of the sustainable business approach, I guess. Marcel, for Philips, you've been developing concepts of product as service through your new lighting products and other products. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the challenges you've encountered, perhaps both internally and externally, as you've developed these, the product as service approach.
Yeah, when you look at for example, lighting as a service, it has a massive change. And just to use some words, he said some time ago, at Philips we have the process of fundamentally end-to-end value change, because instead that we start selling products, we can sell them, the use of resources. And when you look to the service concept, what we did is we looked to, okay, what are essential enablers to make it happen? And we identified 4 key enablers. So one is, for example, business models. So if you compare a selling model with a use as a service model, there's a main shift in, we start talking about long-term contracts. Think about 5, 10, maybe 15-year contracts, which is new for a manufacturing company, because we have to understand what are the implications, how you deal with warranty, how you deal with guarantee. So what kind of KPIs can you build in that relation, in that business model, to monitor the impact that the product has over time, and how do you ensure that the service that you provide meets the requirements of the customer? The second enabler is actually about design. So if you start selling the product as a service, how do you make sure that you offer the right product? Because only you, or let's say we in this case as Philips, are the owner of the product over the usage time. And that means, do we have enough details? Do we know how to maintain it properly? Can we offer actually a different technology or a different solution? And then the third one is about collaboration. So what are the right partners? Because if you talk, for example, light as a service, and you take a parking garage or you take an office building, in general we sell the products to an installer. They install, and then the building owner has a facility managing company, and they have some kind of maintenance contracts in place. So once we offer light as a service, suddenly we become a much more important player in the whole concept. So that means, first of all, how do we identify the right partners, and what are the right partners, and how do you make sure that you maintain the relationship over a longer period of time? And then the fourth enabler is actually about reverse logistics. So if you have a contract of 10 or 15 years, what can you do end of life of those products? So can you take them back and upgrade them and reinstall them at a different location? What can you do with the components that come out of that product? So depending on the innovation cycle in those products, till what extent can you reuse certain, let's say, more critical components, or do you need to put everything back into a recycling loop? That are things that we are working on and testing, and it's not in such a way that every customer has the same solution. So it's not one standard fits all. So the challenge for us is it's learning by doing, but at the same time just tackle the challenges that are ahead of us. And then I come back again, you need to have a good collaboration, you have to be open and transparent, and the customer needs to understand what it means for them as well. So what are the benefits on the short and the long term? So that's, let's say, a bit in a nutshell. And we see an increase in demand for customers asking us for light as a service, because they see the benefits of having the best quality of light at their premises.
Great, thank you very much. Sorry, slight technical hitch there. I wondered, perhaps now could we look at some specific examples. Justin, you mentioned from your research, you mentioned the Audi Unite program and also Airbnb. I wondered, just from from the research you did. Can you give a little bit of background as to how these specific programs work, just in practice? And then I'd like to come to Forbes as well to perhaps talk about some specific examples of a circular economy program working in practice. So Justin.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. And maybe just one build on the input that we've just heard from the others. I think it's really important to see the circular economy as a business transformation agenda, because we often pull out these examples, and there are some really fantastic projects underway. There are pilots that perhaps we're waiting to see scaled. But I think one of the things that's unique about the companies on this call, and I perhaps call out Veolia, is that they've really seen this as a transformation agenda. We're actually witnessing the transformation of a company from being a waste management company to a resources company, and it's had very, very strong sponsorship from the CEO, which is absolutely critical. But it's also perhaps meant that the company's had to build new sets of capabilities to buy in expertise that it perhaps didn't have, to develop new technologies that it didn't have. And so it's very important that we, particularly in the sustainability field, don't see this as being just about the sustainability profession. It's going to require wholesale transformation of the business, and therefore bringing the right individuals into the process to support that transformation, right from the top through to strategy, through to marketing, technology, sourcing, procurement, right the way through to how you manage the relationship with the customer. So I think that's the first thing to say. The second is, for those couple of examples that I mentioned, what we found through the research was that digital and technology are playing a very, very critical role in unlocking the opportunity for these models to work. Many of the ideas, for example, the sharing economy and product as a service, we've talked about for decades. But what's different this time is that digital technologies, particularly social, mobile, analytics, cloud, machine-to-machine technologies, are starting to make these business models viable. And it's the combination of these technologies. So if you take Audi Unite, for example, from machine-to-machine, embedded SIM cards in the vehicle, the Unite beacon, which is able to provide a unique identifier for the individual and then monitor their specific usage. These are all technologies that have been brought together to allow a personalized micro car sharing model to work. I think 3D printing as well, we haven't touched on, but will also be very, very disruptive in enabling new circular models. So I think that the role of technology was one of the key things that came through in that research.
Fine, thank you. Thanks, Justin. So Forbes, from your perspective then, what specific examples can you share where developing a circular economy has worked with you and your partners, your clients, your customers? Can you just give some examples of just how you've got to that stage?
Yes, I mean, we've got a range of examples from some relatively low-tech, sort of straightforward connections that have been made to more investment-heavy and perhaps more creative solutions. And I think it's absolutely key from your customer or your partner in this, and is working with a distillery in Scotland. The distillery was suffering by per ton for disposal of the spent grain. They had an opportunity to sell it into feedstock, but it fluctuated and it didn't give them security that they really needed. We've put in a biomass boiler, and the spent grain is now pressed. The liquid fraction is cleaned up through some filter technology, and the water is sent to an anaerobic digestion plant on site. The biogas from the plant is burnt, and the energy goes back to the distillery, and then the remaining solids are repressed and join the rest of the spent solids. The clean water also from the process goes back into the distillery as processed water. The solids go to the biomass boiler, obviously burnt, produce energy that goes back to the plant, and the ash is currently under testing. We believe we can pelletize it. It's phosphate rich, and that can go back on the fields that grow the grain that go back to the distillery. So it's a very literal circular economy within that process for that distillery, and there is interest in rolling that out to all the facilities owned by that particular group. So it's a very clear and easy demonstration. Another approach, a sort of perhaps less conventional approach, and really alluding to what Justin was saying, the corporate mindset within Veolia UK is actually we're going to become a producer of green products. So we're looking further than just raw materials, the bulk plastic bottles like I mentioned. And one good example is with a multinational company. They have scrap hand or dishwashing liquid from their manufacturing process, from trade returns, etc., etc. And previously they were again paying to dispose of this. We are taking that material, depacking it, bulking it up, and we are turning it, because it's got very high quality surfactants in it. We're reusing the surfactants in the manufacture of truck wash. And we're using that truck wash, or we're just starting to use, because we're still at pilot phase, but we're using this truck wash to clean our own trucks. And we've had interest from a national train company who are also interested in us converting or using these surfactants to make a kind of green train wash. So it's actually us moving from being the old truck and dump waste management company through the recycling company and actually into a green product manufacturing company. So it's a huge change in the way the business looks at the materials that we manage, and we've got a much more open mind to what we can do and who we can partner with to bring value back to our customers and to ourselves.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Bob. I guess that there are many opportunities for particularly resource-heavy industries. You mentioned distilling, very high users of energy. Those are the sort of industries where developing a circular model, a circular economy is certainly going to be beneficial. I wonder if we can move a little bit on now to talking about just developing capabilities in the circular economy, and how companies can address some of the practical questions around developing circular business strategies. Martin, I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about, just from your experience, how you're in specifics, how circularity can affect your product development and your product development strategy.
Yes. So one of the programs we are running is to look into alternative feedstocks. And those can be two kinds of feedstocks. So it can be a molecule which should be identical to what we are already using today. So we're using a solvent for a coating, and then usually this comes out of naphtha, from oil. But you can also produce this by fermentation from sugars, from corn or sugarcane, for example. So that's one type. And another type of alternative feedstock is a new molecule which offers a novel functionality. But in both cases, this requires some efforts of our product development people. So even if it's the same molecule, there might be different impurities. The process will be different. So the molecule will never be, the material that you get will never be 100% the same. So this will require a product validation. So we would need to test the samples. In some cases, the lifetime of the product is very important. We also, after 5 or 10 years, the coating needs to offer the same functionality. So this type of test can take a very long time. If it is a novel functionality, or if it changes the properties a little, we might need to reformulate the product. So it's not, alternative feedstocks can be very beneficial, but also requires quite some effort from our research and development people in order to implement those in our supply chains. if you look at feedstocks based on waste products, what we typically see is that wastes are generally rather heterogeneous. So this also brings some challenges in order to get to a more homogeneous and product quality, which we can then use in our operations.
Great, thank you. I mean, it's interesting you say that you're talking about the time it takes to do the testing, and I imagine it's vital for your customers that the functionality of the product is the same. They don't want to be thinking that, well, I'm getting this new product, but the functionality and it's not going to perform as well as a traditional product. So I'd imagine it's vital for developing circular models that the products that you produce have the same functionality and the same performance as previous ones.
Yeah, can I add something there?
Sure.
So what I think is important, that if you look at more sustainable products or raw materials, that you have like a triangle of the performance, the sustainability profile, and the cost. So if you come with a product which has the same performance, same cost, and it's more sustainable, then in many cases, then the customers will prefer it. Although there will also be some customers who will think like, oh, this is more sustainable, so it's probably so the perceived quality might be lower. But what is very important that even if the sustainability profile is better, if you come with a green product, that you down on quality, or you cannot ask a higher price generally. So usually, yeah, the other two should not be worse than what you're commonly.
Turning a little bit to and procurement, Marcel, I wonder, from your perspective, how do you think that circular economy and developing circular economy models affect the job of a supply chain manager? How is the change from linear to circular affecting the job of somebody in that position?
Yeah, let's say that what we sense in the last few years is that let's say procurement organizations are in a transformation, and I think even with the fact that circular economy is now becoming not just a hype, but will soon become, let's say, standard way of doing business, we believe within Philips that procurement can be, let's say, a key enabler in this whole transition or transformation process. And what we currently try to do is, when you look to procurement and its function, then it has a huge impact in the whole value chain. So, and there are even some people, and not only within Philips but also outside of Philips, they think that the role of procurement will change, or at least the name of procurement will change, and that they will become a kind of value chain manager. And that means that because they have an interaction with many cross-functional disciplines, whether it's legal, whether it's product or product marketing, whether it's operations, whether it's innovation, they need to be, let's say, involved through the whole value chain development of a product or of a service. And in order to do that, they need to make sure that they take into account certain sustainability aspects. So that means they need to be connected to the corporate strategy. They need to understand what are their responsibilities from their pure procurement role, but also from a value chain perspective. And that means that also governance and how do you quantify actually the value of circular economy is a challenging one. So when we look to, let's say, all the tools that we use within Philips during product development, whether you talk about DFMA, DFMEA, or when you talk about value stream mapping, or when you talk about clean sheeting, whatever tools there are, they are all based currently on linear thinking. So that means how do you create the best product for the lowest price? And a few of those tools we are currently updating so that we take more elements of the value chain into account. So if you think about the design of a product linked to where it is in the supply chain or in the value chain, think about flexibility of a product or upgradability of a product. Think about the technical versus the economical lifetime. Reverse logistics are going to become much more important instead of just the push out thinking that we always have been. So let's say we are, let's say, a forwarded distribution-oriented company, and suddenly we get a reversed logistics loop into account. So the challenge for us from a procurement perspective is how can we quantify it, and how can we show the integral value. And when you look, for example, to best value procurement, that's already one major step in the direction of a kind of circular procurement. I think the mindset of procurement needs to change, that it's not just about cost price, but that they really can play a significant role in the integral approach. And at the end, procurement processes are connected to all other business processes. So every decision you make during whatever stage you are in the value chain has a direct impact on the procurement function, because decisions you make in the beginning of your product or service development have an impact to one of your partners up or downstream your supply chain. And that means we, in this case, we together with our partners, need to be able to identify where is the value. And in some cases it means that a partner, let's say further downstream, might have initially not such a high value, but because of his role, the total integral value might be much higher. And the challenge at the end is how can you quantify that, first of all, in a proper way, and second, how do you make sure that everybody gets an equal share of that integrated value? So there are a lot of thoughts, and we need to find a way how we map it and how we make it visible, because that's also part of creating transparency in that integrated value chain. So let's say this is a quite high-level approach, and we are testing in some of the tools to see how can you compare a linear model with a circular model. And it's learning by doing, and we get good insights in that.
Great. And I'd imagine that the getting away from always focusing on the price point at sale, what point of sale, that is a key message about circular economy and many wider sustainable business concepts as well. Wonder, can we just change tack slightly again and think a bit about the customers and how they view circular economy, and whether your customers see the benefits of circular economy, if they, how do you move them from thinking purely about price? How do you get them to be more engaged with the kind of circular economy concepts and as your business develops them? I wonder, Forbes, could you just say, I mean, you talked a bit about how you've worked with your customers, but have you found much resistance, or is it something that people have generally got on board with?
It really depends on the customer, Ian. I mean, we've seen very clearly that our customers are absolutely on a spectrum from the initial engagement with us, which is we've got a problem, a waste problem, please make it go away, up through customers that are very engaged with sustainability and customers that are actively trying to design and develop their circular economy concepts and objectives. So it really does depend who we're talking to. As I said, some of our customers are very advanced and understand that partnerships are going to be required, and to develop really long-term sustainable circular programs is going to take time and effort. Whereas others are still at, we've got some complex waste streams, we just want to try and divert them away from landfill, which is, simply bring the right technology to the party. So it's very much a spectrum. Those that get it obviously want to engage and move forwards, because most of them have bought into the fact that it's a competitive advantage. And then there are people that are, still learning and exploring what the opportunities could be for their business.
And do you find that once you engage with your customers, is there a sort of tipping point? It goes from, well, I just need this stuff removed as cheaply as possible and complying with all the necessary legislation, but is there a point where they can suddenly, you feel like, the light comes on and they can see that there's a definite, for them, advantage, a business advantage as well as everything else?
I think for some there is. It does depend who we're talking to. It tends to be senior management higher up the chain get the bigger picture, whereas if they might be constrained by the requirements of their particular job. So we tend to a multiple dialogue. It'll be very focused on price. More senior management can be more strategic. So it's we do tend to get the light going on and people wanting to move forward. Sometimes we are simply restricted by what technology is available, because much as I'd like to say we can deliver a solution for anything, there are still some huge challenges out there with respect to waste streams and connecting things up to ensure we're not losing a lot of the resources that we are today.
Sure. This actually is a good point to bring in a question from our audience. Just leading on from what Forbes has said, we need to talk a little bit about the what are the key drivers for championing circular economy within leadership in companies, and what do we have to do to get the leadership of companies to buy in? I mean, just Forbes, just to carry on, for you internally, what have been the key drivers you've had to focus on to get your internal leadership to grasp these concepts, and then dealing with your customers, just very quickly, internally and then externally?
I think internally, the senior management saw the way the industry was evolving, and with legislation squeezing landfill today in Europe, it's not a long-term sustainable problem. We handle lots of materials. We know that best value is through recycling, reuse, etc., etc. External customers, it still tends to be value. If we can bring value into the equation, and it can be long term, it doesn't have to be the short win, but if we can bring value to that business, whether it's decreased costs or increased revenues, then that is a huge accelerator. So fundamentally, I still think it's a sort of dollar-based game.
Yeah. Sure. Great. Okay. Just moving that over to Marcel. For you, what are the for your customers? How have your customers developed their knowledge of the circular economy and benefits? And then just focusing on that question from the audience as well. Just what are the drivers for engaging with your leadership as well? So looking at external towards customers and internally towards your leadership team, just developing the engagement with circular economy.
I think when you look to, let's say, the internal leadership, our CEO is really into this topic. So wherever he has the opportunity and the possibility to share his opinion and point of view on circular economy, will certainly do that. For example, he is chairing a project called Mainstream that is run by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, of which Philips is a member. And the Mainstream is about making sure that, let's say, resources are becoming more widely available and reused in a good way, with attention for tracking and collecting them in a more efficient way, because a lot of those resources, especially when you look to consumer products, they end up in communal systems, and we lose actually a lot of valuable material. So he is really seeing that we need to do something, and we need to do it together. Like I said in the beginning, collaboration is very key in that. When you look to, let's say, the mid-level management, I think that's a challenge in every company, because they need to make sure that the daily operations are run smoothly, and they have sometimes more the short-term focus. However, when you look to Philips as a business, and that brings both the internal as well as the customer perspective together, and I'll use an example for that, is when we look for healthcare business, we have a very strong business case for refurbishing systems. So in that sense, we work closely together with our customers, being hospitals, in offering them a new proposition. So instead of they, for example, buy the expensive equipment, they can make use of refurbished systems. That's one opportunity or offer that we can make. But we can also offer them something similar like light as a service, but then equipment as a service. So there are different propositions where customers, given on the market they are in, the similar counts for the companies that are offering the circular economy propositions, makes it easier for a customer to accept such kind of propositions. So when you look to the budget cuts that take place in a lot of countries on healthcare, this is it's a huge opportunity for us to offer, let's say, these kind of solutions. The benefit for us as well is that we strengthen our relationship with the customer. So instead of that you only have, you sold the product and you only go there when it's in a repair or a service issue, you have a different relationship, because you need to make sure that the system is always running smooth and it's always
Thanks, Marcel. I'm just conscious we're running close now to running out of time. I wanted to bring in a further question from the audience for everybody. Principally, looking to government support to develop the circular economy. Obviously, business is leading the way, as it often does. But what do we think is the role of government, and what can government do to help develop the circular economy? Justin, are you on the line? We've had some trouble contacting. Great. Perhaps you could.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Very quickly, just could you tell us, from your view, what's the role of government? Just very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question and an important question. I suppose there are two sides. I think there's a kind of proactive piece for me, which is probably more about light policy and encouraging companies to be able to develop the right technologies, process redesign, the development of new materials and products that allows us to unlock some of these models without heavy regulation. And it's more about allowing companies to find new opportunities, so less stick and more carrot. But I think at the same time there's a recognition, and this kind of bore out in our recent work with the UN Global Compact, where it was very clear that CEOs are now wanting a stronger enabling environment from policymakers to help them scale their progress on the circular economy. And so I think there it means developing better infrastructure for material management, and that's both physical, so take back, sorting, reverse logistics, but it may also be infrastructure around digital to allow us to start harnessing some of the technologies that we talked about earlier. I think secondly, having the right frameworks for trading, recycling, recycled materials, remanufactured products and resources across borders is going to be very important for us to be able to unlock, particularly with some of the constraints we've got around, for example, processing capacity for electronic waste. And I think we might look at more extended producer responsibility. So I know France is rolling out producer responsibility for furniture, and it might be we start to see producer responsibility responding to other categories. And of course, landfill bans and increasing the cost of landfill have been a major driver. So the landfill escalation, for example, in the UK has been very, very important. But I think we just need to have the right balance between the carrot and the stick.
Thanks, Justin. So, Marcel, I wonder, from your perspective, is there the right balance currently? What needs to be done to tip the balance in the right way between the carrot and the stick?
Yeah, let's say for me it's not about carrot and stick, because that has a negative perspective. So I think it makes more sense to create a kind of incentive model. And in the Netherlands, we're working together with other companies and the Dutch government on what we call Green Deal. And there is a Green Deal on circular procurement. And one of the things we try to do is share best practices, learn from each other, and use also the government in that sense as a launching customer. And they struggle, of course, with the European regulations on how to select, in this case, services, because in some cases there is only one service provider, and according to the EU law, it's not always allowed to set out a tender. And I think that's the challenge, because there is a lot of interest not only in the public domain, but also in the non-public domain. And the government is a key driver, and they should not focus too much, from my point of view, on creating a lot of new legislations. They should create the surroundings in that sense, where you can stimulate to create, let's say, pilot projects that then set new standards or open up new areas to build up on. And because if they show that it is possible in a large extent, then a lot of companies will follow their behavior. And if you talk about a stick and a carrot, then it's always going in from my point of view, in a negative direction. So focus initially, let's say 80% on the carrot or the incentive, and only use, let's say, the stick if there's really no other option.
Sure. Thanks, Marcel. Forbes, I guess from a waste management perspective, there's an awful lot of legislation involved in the processes that your company is engaged with. How have you seen things changing, and what do you want government to do in the future?
There's a couple of, I would say, sticking points. I mean, there's lots of things we'd like, but I think thinking specifically about circularity, end of waste is a piece of legislation that's quite challenging, not because it is particularly difficult, but there's just a significant amount of work to do to get a material that was previously classified as a waste classified as not a waste, as a resource, when we find a new solution for it. It would be helpful if that was streamlined or clarified, because it is a bit grey. Obviously, also there's the planning for new facilities, because quite frankly, you know, to keep the rate of development of the infrastructure, we're going to have to build more stuff, more facilities that can treat you know, a broader range of materials. And then I think it was already mentioned by one of the previous speakers about moving resources around certainly Europe. You know, if we have end of waste, it's easy to move material, but as a waste, it's sometimes challenging, depending on where you want the material to go, depending on what the material is. As we become more circular, we're going to need to look at that to make sure we can get materials to places where they can be reused, or at least deliver the best value. So, you know, within those sort of small, I suppose, relatively waste-specific issues, I do feel that the government can certainly encourage circularity. I'm a supporter of carrot rather than stick. I think encouragement for, you know, either, you know, increasing recycled content or other incentives is definitely the way to move forward.
Thanks, Forbes. Just very quickly turning to Martin then, for you, perhaps in a couple of sentences, what are the role of government? Obviously, there have been a lot of chemicals and coatings legislation come through in the last few years. How has this helped, as far as you're concerned, develop towards circular economy models?
Yes, so I think there's quite a bit that the government can do. So as Forbes just mentioned, so taking away barriers like in waste legislation, but also what we see in chemicals is that you're competing often, but if you come with a new technology, you're competing with technologies and factories that are there already for decades, that are optimized, depreciated. So some support from the government to come up with new things, to remove barriers, the right incentives, but also a level playing field with other industries using the same feedstock. So that's something that's really, well, the governments are discussing this, but there's some more steps are needed to help establish those new industries.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to have to stop the discussion here because we're out of time. I would like to thank our panel very much for their time and insight today, and also our audience for listening and for all the questions. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to more of them. As always, these are things you tend to run out of time before we can get through as many questions as we'd like. Once again, if you'd like to understand how to create a circular business and understand the case for how this would help your company develop new and sustainable venue and revenue streams, please join us for the Circular Advantage Business Forum that we're hosting in London on the 8th and 9th of June. Feel free to contact us at Innovation Forum with any questions and comments. I hope you've all enjoyed the webinar, and thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ian.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you.